On with the show and into our second segment, more talk about the quarterbacks and their extensions and who will be next in finally getting done and getting over that line to earn themselves another contract extension. Well, we'll focus in on Jordan Love for the time being. Jordan Love, obviously, last year became the starter, the quote unquote, the guy there in Green Bay to finally have a full season as their quarterback one. After waiting 3 years to finally get this role, he played it out last year, and it didn't start off very well at all. There was a lot of doubts about him, and it didn't get to about mid-season when he really started to click and started to really turn the page. And you saw a little glimpse of the potential that this team could reach there in his first season. He ended the regular season throwing 4,159 yards, 32 touchdowns, and having a 64% completion percentage in his first year to go along with 11 interceptions, which isn't the worst of ratios, touchdown to interception ratio at all for your first year as the guy. Made it to the divisional round in the playoffs and ended up losing that game to the eventual NFC champions, but he had a good win in the wild card, or the entire team did, the Green Bay Packers, when they traveled to Dallas and really just owned the Dallas Cowboys in their stadium. And then to play in the divisional round again on the road, they had a good chance of doing that to win in San Francisco against the 49ers, but it just seemed to come down to a rookie mistake, just that inexperience from Jordan Love there towards the end. Trying to be the hero and make a pretty improbable throw. He ends up throwing an interception, and that ends up being the game. But, up to that point, I think a lot of people were pleasantly surprised with Jordan Love and how he produced, and really exceeding expectations, because from the start in September to where he ended up in January, a lot of people would take that as the first real year for Jordan Love. But now, after a season like that, you start talking more business. What does he deserve? And with all the quarterback contract talks going on right now, it's a very adamant and very legitimate conversation now to have with Jordan Love, because this past year in 2023 was technically his last year on his rookie deal. And like most quarterbacks, the difference with Jordan Love and his contract was that last offseason around March, he signed a one-year extension with the Green Bay Packers for 2023 to still be the last year on his rookie deal, but instead of that typical fifth-year option for all the first-round selections, he opted out and opted for this contract extension. He agreed to that with the Green Bay Packers, and this really benefited the Packers more so than Jordan Love, obviously now in hindsight, because agreeing to that one-year extension instead of that fifth-year option, Jordan Love loses out on some money, just the matter of fact. With the extension, that one-year extension, he earns $13.5 million guaranteed, which could go up to about $22 million, but he'd have to reach certain benchmarks this season, probably, leading a category in a stat category potentially, or making it to the Super Bowl or something like that. Being an MVP conversation, some sort of things like that, I'm sure could raise it a little bit more. But for right now, he's guaranteed 13.5, and that compared to that fifth-year option would have been $20 million guaranteed on that fifth-year option. So the Packers are sort of getting a bargain right now with this extension that they agreed to with Jordan Love, and he definitely exceeded those limitations on that sort of contract. Definitely worth more than that $13.5 million based on what he did last year. So now, obviously, the pressure is sort of on the Packers to, base their decision now off of the one season where Jordan Love really played out of his mind, and now you have the possibility of finding your next franchise guy for the next 8 to 10 years, and you don't want to miss out on that opportunity, obviously, because you're fortunate enough to transition from Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers, and now it's seemingly Jordan Love. With the young talent you have around him, the Packers don't want to mess up this opportunity and aren't really taking anything for granted really at this point. I think they've seen enough, which is odd because it sort of reminds me of the Tua Tagovailoa situation in his contract, and how people take different approaches to that situation compared to Jordan Love. And I wanted to touch on that in just a few seconds, but more so on this contract extension and how it's going so far. Green Bay Packers general manager Brian Gutekunst spoke on Tuesday to 97.3 The Game, the official radio station of all sports in Milwaukee, about where the two sides currently sit in their contract negotiations. And he basically, said, we're in those conversations right now. Both parties want the same thing, and we'd like to get this done before training camp for sure. And both parties want to get a contract extension done. That stability at that position really allows you to have some security with the way we built our team. And that last part was really interesting, but before I expand on that a little bit more, I wanted to mention that 9 different quarterbacks currently make over $95 million per year, which for me, if I'm Jordan Love, if I'm his agent or anybody discussing this deal, that's probably the absolute minimum right now for a guy putting up those numbers, like I mentioned, over 4,000 yards, over 30 touchdowns, 64% completion percentage. Not a lot of guys in the NFL can do that. You are very fortunate enough as the Green Bay Packers to find them late in the first round there and getting him to learn behind one of the most talented quarterbacks we've seen in NFL history to now blossom into something that you could carry into and still develop into a better player for the next 8 to 10 years, I think will be massive. And going back to that last part, that stability at that position, the quarterback position, as Gutekunst said, it really allows you to have some security with the way we built our team. And that's really the most vital part of this statement by their general manager, because you think about Jordan Love, very young, I think still 25, 24 years old, and then you have the rest of the team that averages, at least on the offensive side, I think Josh Jacobs is no older than 27, 28. You have all your receivers who are, again, not much older than 24 years old. I think the oldest is Christian Watson at 24. Then you got a bunch of 22, 23-year-old guys in there that really, again, exceeded expectations in this offense last year. Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavion Wicks as well. All these guys that maybe other teams didn't really know about or really didn't put too much emphasis on also grew a lot as players in their development alongside Jordan Love. And the best thing about that, exceeding these expectations, is that they come at a very cheap price right now for the Green Bay Packers. I mentioned it when when Justin Jefferson got his contract. Of all the 12 wide receivers that are on the Green Bay Packers roster currently, all of them cumulatively make $12 million altogether, and Justin Jefferson, one player, is making $35 million per year. So, again, a situation that you can't throw away right now, striking gold with all this young talent that you've really just drafted and developed very well. And really, that just adds more pressure to this situation with Jordan Love of trying to get a deal over the hump, the sooner the better, to really blossom this team and really take advantage of this opportunity that you have a very well put together team, very young, have great potential to not only win that division, but to really compete in the NFC with some of the best players, or some of the best teams, I should say, in the conference, like the 49ers, like the Detroit Lions, the Philadelphia Eagles as well. I think the Packers could give all of those teams a run for their money, but you need that stability at the quarterback position, like Gutekunst said. And that's really the main reason I think this deal will get done before training camp. I would also agree with Gutekunst here, but it is worth noting also that back in May, Jordan Love was asked about the potential of playing this year on that $13.5 million price tag, and he said that he wasn't sure. He didn't know really if he was willing to play this year if no extension got done, and so far he hasn't been holding out. That statement doesn't leave you too confident in what that exactly means for your starting quarterback, but he has been present so far. He will be there most likely for mandatory minicamp, so you can't really predict if he's going to be there for training camp. The recent, actions that he has shown in the offseason will sort of assume that he will be there, but he could throw a wrench in the whole situation if he is starting to get impatient to not show up to training camp, and then that's really where this whole situation could turn on its head. But I expect the deal to get done, but the one topic that doesn't sit well with me a little bit is how this situation sort of compares to another quarterback looking for an extension in Tua Tagovailoa with the Miami Dolphins. Similar in the one way that both quarterbacks are coming off of the one very impressive year that they've had in the NFL. From Tua's side, most of his career has been in and out, dealing with injuries. The concussions obviously aren't a great thing, and just really not convincing too many people up until last year, where through the first 5 to 4 weeks, he was in legitimate MVP conversations. Now, 4 to 5 weeks into a season, I can see how that really doesn't hold too much weight, but he was performing very well to start the year and quarterbacked a team that I want to say had about 11 wins, 12 wins last season, and they didn't end the year particularly well. It didn't work out for them in the playoffs. Obviously, that is always going to stick with the Dolphins and Tua, but he had a great year last year stat-wise, and also similarly to Jordan Love. And I just think when you're talking about, or you hear people talk about these contract negotiations with Tua and with Jordan Love, it sounds very, very distinct when you're mentioning both of them, even though both are coming off their best years in the NFL and similar situations in terms of performance and production. But one guy is looked at, Jordan Love, as being just on the brink of being on the positive side of a great payday, just on the brink of really reaching his potential. More people seem confident that Jordan Love could go on to exceed expectations more and more, whereas with Tua, it seems like that one year, that one positive year like the one Jordan Love had, more people are still doubtful around that and aren't really too convinced with Tua up until this point. And I know playoff success does hold a big weight when you're talking about this amount of money, but it is similar a lot up to that playoff point. So to see the distinction in how people talk about the two quarterbacks and their contracts and how much each of them are worth, I think it's pretty interesting in how people evaluate quarterbacks. It seems to just change whenever you bring up a certain guy and how you really evaluate him, but that's just me. That's how I feel about it. I thought it was interesting now thinking about those two. And the main thing for the Packers now with just sticking to Jordan Love is to wrap this up before you get into those contract negotiations with Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence. Those two guys are right there also looking for a contract extension. So if you're the Packers, the borderline, the limit right now stands at about $55 million. I don't think Jordan Love is going to get that, but you hope to get this done sooner rather than later, where maybe Dak gets over 50, maybe Trevor Lawrence gets over 50, and now Jordan Love is looking at them like, I made it further than both of them already in the playoffs. Why can't I get that amount of money? So if you work this out before those two get done, it benefits the Packers a lot more. They save more money, and you nail down your quarterback for the foreseeable future for 3 years, whatever the extension may be. Before these two other guys, you don't have that pressure on you anymore, and you could just focus on football in 2024. But in the meantime, that's where it stands right now, and that's where we'll leave this topic as we head into our second break of the show. And when we return, we're going to talk some more off-season situations, this time again with the Dallas Cowboys. Now that Michael Parsons has returned to practice, what sort of explanation did he give for not showing up thus far to the offseason, now making himself present at the mandatory mini camps for the Dallas Cowboys? He said some interesting stuff that I think you guys would want to hear, so stick around and keep listening to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.